military once built a human calculator that could solve equations faster than any machine. The year was 1973. The Vietnam War still smoldered. The Cold War hung like a winter fog over every Pentagon briefing. Deep inside a windowless bunker at Fort Benning, Georgia, 10 elite soldiers stood in a line. Their uniforms were crisp, their boots polished to a mirror sheen. A red needle traced a jagged line on a strip of paper. The air smelled of ozone and sweat. A voice from a speaker crackled, 12 times 13. Go. The first soldier's lips twitched. His fingers tapped his thigh once, twice, 3 times. 12 times 13 is 156. The room fell silent. The needle froze. A data logger buzzed. The computer blinked its slow green cursor. Processing, 1.7 seconds. The soldier had answered before the machine even started. This was Project Pegasus, not the mythical winged horse. Pegasus was a DARPA black project. Its goal: turn human brains into ballistic computers. They called it the Human Calculator Program. The brass wanted soldiers who could outthink missiles, outcompute artillery tables, solve logistics in real time while bullets flew. The scientists had one trick: neurostimulation. They strapped electrodes to the soldiers' scalps. Pulses of electricity, weaker than an AA battery, fired into the prefrontal cortex. 10 minutes a day. No pain. Just a faint tingling behind the eyes. Like a coffee buzz for the mind. But the results were anything but mild. Within weeks, the soldiers could factor primes, integrate polynomials, solve differential equations in their heads. Numbers arranged themselves like soldiers on a grid. No scratch paper. No calculators. Just instant, perfect answers. In one demo, a corporal named Mark Reynolds faced off against the Army's fastest mainframe. The task: compute the trajectory of a shell fired from a howitzer at 45 degrees. Wind speed, 12 miles per hour. Air density, standard. The computer whirred. Its fan droned like a dying insect. Mark closed his eyes. His fingers twitched. A pencil wasn't needed. He opened his eyes. Range, 14,237 meters. The computer blinked. 14,237 meters. The room erupted, not in cheers, in silence, because the computer had taken 47 seconds. Mark had taken 12. And he hadn't broken a sweat. That was the moment everything changed. Not just for the soldiers, for the scientists, for the Pentagon, for the entire defense industry. Because if a soldier could outrun a computer in 1973, what else could they outrun? What else could they predict? What else could they control? The implications were endless. Tactical nuclear targeting, real-time battlefield logistics, instant cryptanalysis. A soldier's brain could become a weapon, but weapons need budgets, and budgets need justification. So DARPA scheduled a full field test. Live ammunition, moving targets, computers on one side, Pegasus soldiers on the other. The test site was a desert range in Arizona. Dust swirled in the dry heat. A jeep rolled forward, its engine coughing. On the horizon, a drone hummed like a mosquito. The soldiers stood in formation. Their helmets were modified. Wires snaked down their backs. A technician adjusted a dial on a black box labeled STIM 3. Ready. The order came through headsets. Target coordinates: azimuth 120, elevation 35, distance 8,000 meters. Wind 8 knots from the southwest. Temperature 102 degrees. The soldiers closed their eyes. Their pupils trembled behind closed lids. The first soldier spoke. Windage correction -2.7 degrees. Elevation 36.2. Time of flight 28.9 seconds. He didn't flinch. The second soldier added, almost whispering, correction for Coriolis effect, 0.4 mils right. The drone banked sharply. The soldiers didn't move. They didn't shout. They just knew. The artillery officers watched the screens, their faces pale. The computers were still calculating. They were always calculating. But the soldiers had already fired the shot in their minds. 7 seconds later, the shell landed within 1.2 meters of the drone. The computer's margin of error was 12 meters. Pegasus had just outperformed a multimillion-dollar system with a $200 helmet and a 10-minute daily jolt. That night, the brass gathered in a trailer with a single satellite phone. The call lasted 20 minutes. When it ended, the project lead stood up. He looked at the soldiers. He looked at the computers. He made a decision. Project Pegasus was over. Not paused. Over. The soldiers were told their services were no longer required. Their files were sealed. Their equipment confiscated. The helmets melted down. The data tapes shredded. The only thing left was a single line in a declassified DARPA report from 1975. Project Pegasus terminated due to lack of military utility. But that line was a lie. Because the military utility was obvious. The problem wasn't the science. It was the threat. To the computer industry. To the defense contractors. To the entire ecosystem of machines that had just learned they could be obsolete overnight. IBM had a $5 billion contract for military computing. Univac was building the next generation of guidance systems. Honeywell supplied the Pentagon's mainframes. They all had lobbyists. And lobbyists have ears in Congress. So when the generals whispered about soldiers replacing computers, the lobbyists whispered back. They reminded the politicians about campaign donations. They reminded them about jobs. They reminded them that soldiers retire. Computers don't. They don't unionize. They don't get PTSD. They don't sue for benefits. So Project Pegasus was buried, not quietly, violently. Every scientist who worked on it was reassigned. Every soldier was given a promotion and a gag order. One researcher, Dr. Eleanor Voss, kept a single notebook. She wrote in pencil, her hand shaking. She described the tests. She drew diagrams of the circuits. She even sketched the soldiers' facial expressions when they solved the unsolvable. She hid the notebook in a safety deposit box in Zurich. She never told her family. She died in 2001. Her daughter found the box 20 years later. Inside were 174 pages of equations, diagrams, and a single sentence underlined in red. They didn't want to know the truth, because the truth was dangerous, not just to budgets. To the entire idea of progress. If a human brain could outcompute a supercomputer in 1973, what about 1983? What about 2023? What if the real revolution wasn't in silicon? What if it was in flesh? And what if someone, somewhere, is still doing it in secret? We dug through declassified archives. We found the soldiers' names. We tracked down their children. We listened to their voices crack when they remembered the numbers. They still remember the numbers. Every single one. Mark Reynolds still solves calculus problems in his head while waiting in line at the grocery store. He doesn't tell anyone. The military called it a failure. But Mark knows better. He knows the truth. The numbers never left him. They never left any of them. And somewhere, in a lab no one talks about, there are new soldiers, new helmets, new currents, new calculations. And this time they won't stop. They won't be erased. Because the map of human knowledge has blank spaces, and the most interesting science is almost never the science they teach you. Subscribe now. And tell us in the comments, which hidden experiment would you uncover next?